Number 7. Zoe and Joan Lee. In January of 2018, Englishwoman Lisa Hall, aged 44, accompanied her daughter Holly during a night out in Bognor Regis, West Sussex. At about 11:30 p.m, the mother of 3 reportedly decided that she was too tired to continue the evening's activities and called her husband to come pick her and 23-year-old Holly up. While the Halls were awaiting their ride home, a young woman later named Zoe Lee approached the pair and aggressively insulted Lisa in a seemingly random verbal assault. Lee then proceeded to unleash a brutal physical attack on the woman, in the perpetration of which she was aided by her own mother, Joan. It was later reported that Lisa blacked out after she'd been punched to the ground, kicked and stomped on by the hostile mother and daughter. When she came to, Holly was standing over her with tears in her eyes. Her husband, who by then had arrived at the scene, insisted that she go to the hospital. The vicious attack left Lisa with a shattered ankle that required intensive surgery to repair. Investigators ultimately concluded that Zoe and Joan Lee had targeted the victim because they were envious of her physical appearance. They were both charged with causing grievous bodily harm and consequently imprisoned for 5 years each. Number 6. Charles Jessup. After ending her relationship with Charles Jessup in 2019, Claire Nash began receiving an incessant stream of texts and phone calls from the man, who went as far as to claim he was going to take his own life if they didn't get back together. Jessup sent the 33-year-old woman 95 messages on Christmas Day 2019 and an additional 174 over the next several days. It was reported that Nash had contacted the police about her ex-boyfriend's harassment on 3 separate occasions within a 6-week period, but she chose not to make an official complaint against him. On the morning of January the 16th of 2020, a local law enforcement officer reportedly determined that Nash was at medium risk of being the victim of a domestic violence incident. That same day, Jessup went to the woman's home in Suffolk, England, where with a kitchen knife in hand, he waited for her to arrive. Later that evening, Nash's new boyfriend was alarmed by the sound of screaming on their front doorstep, allegedly hearing Jessup say, "I said I was going to do this to you." He then dialed 999 as an altercation between Jessup and Nash had spilled into the house. Paramedics rushed to the scene, but they were ultimately unable to stop Nash from succumbing to the multiple stab wounds she'd sustained. Jessup reportedly told officers, "I have won," several times as they were arresting him, with the attack believed to have been related to him growing envious that Nash had moved on since their breakup. Following his criminal trial, he was sentenced to a minimum prison term of 30 years. Number 5. Cordelia Farr. On October the 14th of 2019, Wayne Coventry was found dead at his brother's house in Broomsgrove, Worcestershire, England. The 36-year-old had reportedly gotten into a heated argument with his girlfriend, Cordelia Farr, which had escalated into a physical altercation. The row culminated with the latter fatally stabbing Coventry with a kitchen knife. Speaking to the authorities after the deadly incident, Coventry's mother described her son's relationship with Farr as toxic, also claiming that it was characterized by violence and jealousy. The mistrustful and envious attitude with which Farr allegedly approached her relationship with Coventry had previously given rise to other violent outbursts. One such instance had occurred only weeks prior to Coventry's death, when Farr bit the man in his groin region during an argument. Subsequent reports detailed how, on the night of Coventry's killing, Farr plunged the knife directly into his chest and pierced his aorta, which caused him to bleed out within minutes. Following the attack, 38-year-old Farr fled the scene, and she remained on the run until turning herself into the authorities 5 days later. Although she would be ultimately cleared of the charge of murder, Farr was convicted of manslaughter after being tried at Worcester Crown Court, and she was consequently sentenced to 10 years in prison. Number 4. Dominik Barrigan. Englishman Dominik Barrigan's relationship with his girlfriend began to erode in the summer of 2017 as, according to court documents, he had begun to exhibit bizarre behavior that severely unnerved his partner. On one occasion, Barrigan had allegedly made her stand up so he could cover her body in plastic wrap. In spite of the woman's repeated protests, the 25-year-old, who described himself as a devout Christian, was reported to have simply laughed at her discomfort and thrown her onto the bed. after she continued to express her discomfort with the situation, Barrigan begrudgingly gave up on his advances. At a later time, when she conveyed the fact that she was still upset from the incident, the two reportedly got into an extremely animated argument that culminated with Barrigan strangling the woman while lying on top of her. The altercation left her with bruises and scratches on her neck, after which she broke up with Barrigan and began temporarily living with her mother. While she was away from her home, in July of 2017, Barrigan reportedly broke into her residence and found an open box of condoms on her bedside table. Jealous and enraged, he then ransacked his ex-girlfriend's house before setting it on fire. The following day, Barrigan turned himself into the police and he was charged with assault and arson. He was consequently sentenced to 3 years in prison, and he was also issued a restraining order that barred him from making any form of contact with his ex-girlfriend. Number 3. Mary Kanye. Naomi Oni, a Victoria's Secret shop assistant from London, England, was attacked by a woman wearing an Islamic niqab after leaving work on the night of December the 30th of 2012. As was captured on CCTV footage, the female assailant had followed the 22-year-old out of the Westfield shopping centre in Stratford and proceeded to tail her all the way home. When Oni approached her residence, the woman emerged from the shadows and threw acid all over the victim's body, inflicting horrific burns to her face, leg, chest, stomach, and arms. Oni's extensive injuries, one of which included being left nearly blind in one eye, ultimately required 2 facial reconstruction surgeries to mend. Following an investigation into the matter, local authorities identified 22-year-old Mary Kanye as the perpetrator of the acid attack. The young woman had been close friends with Oni since childhood, but they'd reportedly had a falling out a short time prior to the incident. Court documents detailed how Kanye had grown envious of her friend's complexion and appearance. She also alleged that the victim had called her ugly during a previous interaction, and she'd thus premeditated the attack as a cruel form of retaliation. The revelation of Kanye's involvement in her friend's disfigurement proved surprising to many, including Oni herself, who'd unknowingly gone to her attacker to commiserate with her in the incident's wake. Kanye was ultimately jailed for 12 years, following a criminal trial at Sneersbrook Crown Court in London. Today's topic was requested by Romella Kame. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Ryan Abbott. Chelsea Morris of Cheshire, England, was in a tumultuous relationship with Ryan Abbott for 3.5 years. Throughout that period in time, which Morris herself described as rocky, 28-year-old Abbott would allegedly get angry and jealous whenever his girlfriend, who was 7 years his junior, went places where there might be other men present. As a consequence of Abbott's extremely controlling behavior, the young woman had lost touch with many of her friends during the course of their relationship. In March of 2019, Morris got a job at a local store, which reportedly bothered her boyfriend, as she would be required to interact with a large number of people. The young woman decided to move back in with her parents to get away from her abusive partner. However, during a celebratory dinner with loved ones, Morris was confronted by Abbott, and she misguidedly agreed to accompany him back to his apartment. It was there that Abbott allegedly flew into a drug-fueled rage and began berating Morris about interacting with other men. He briefly withdrew to his kitchen before emerging with a machete that he then used to stab Morris in the back and slice her right ring finger. Abbott subsequently fled the scene and continued his violent outburst in the surrounding neighborhood, jumping on cars, emptying trash bins, and smashing the glass windows of adjacent houses. For his various offenses, Abbott was later jailed for 4 years and was also given a 5-year restraining order, barring him from contacting his ex-girlfriend upon his release. While Morris survived the attack, she was reportedly left so emotionally affected by the incident that she refused to leave her house for a long time afterwards. It was also reported that she faced the risk of not being able to properly use her injured finger again. Number 1. Brandon Clark. An Instagram influencer from Utica, New York, was brutally murdered by her romantic partner on July the 14th of 2019. As was detailed in a police report created in connection to the incident, the victim, Bianca Devins, had gone to a concert in New York City with her boyfriend, Brandon Clark. Accompanying them was another male friend of the influencers, who was only identified by his first name as Alex. Following the musical performance, Devins and Clark returned to Utica, where they reportedly got into a contentious argument. The latter confronted Devins and, in a jealous rage, alleged that he'd seen her kissing Alex at the concert. The situation soon escalated, and the 22-year-old man assaulted Devins before he pulled a large knife out from under his car seat and slit her throat. Following the attack, Clark called several of his family members, who contacted 911 in fear of what the man might do to himself or others. Clark then posted pictures of Devins' dead body to social media. Although Instagram ultimately removed the photos from their platform, they faced criticism for waiting nearly a day after they'd been uploaded to take them down. As law enforcement officers arrived at the scene of the murder, Clark sliced his neck in a failed attempt to take his own life. He was taken into custody and charged with second-degree murder. In February of 2020, Clark entered a guilty plea, and in March the following year, he was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have to watch your worst enemy live your dream life, or always have someone else get credit for your accomplishments?